Hello and welcome to the Badger Politic. I'm Scott Stearns.
This is Paul Sickle.
Hey, Paul. How's it going?
Okay.
Late Brewer game tonight against the Cincinnati Reds.
Nice clean win though.
Yeah, it was.
Clean might not be the right word, but
it was actually quite messy.
Mm-hmm.
But it was back and forth.
They duked it out.
Yelich hit for the cycle.
6 hits. Mustaka said 4 hits, and other players got 12 more hits for the Brewers. They had 22 hit attack, scored 13 runs. Unfortunately, Cincinnati also had many hits and scored 12 runs.
Yeah,
so we almost lost it. But
they pulled it out 13-12. I believe was the final.
Right. And I think keeps us in the wild card position.
They are still in the wild card. So that's
second. I think we're still behind St. Louis unless they
half a game. I think.
Up, right?
Yeah. So
Chicago did lose finally a game.
Yeah,
the second part of a doubleheader, so to speak.
Okay.
Because the first part was a suspended game in extra innings from the day before.
Right.
They won that on a walk-off and then lost to the Mets 10-3.
Okay.
So there you go.
So there's that. I think there's something like 30 games left in the season.
So
it's getting down to the wire.
Yeah, we are mourning and also celebrating the life of John McCain, Senator McCain.
Yes, Senator John McCain passed away over the weekend. I mean, it was once they announced, I believe it was Friday, that he was cutting off medical treatment for his brain cancer. It wasn't shocking. I think there was at that point, people were resigned to the idea that it was going to be a matter of probably some days. Mm-hmm. And I believe it was he passed 9 years to the day of Senator Ted Kennedy. Yeah,
the same disease.
Yeah, exactly. So just one of those strange
Lions of the
things.
Senate.
Yeah. It's just funny that it works out that way in terms of the date. I mean,
August 24th, I think, or 25th.
Yeah. So there's a week's worth of events that are taking place. I mean, he's currently lying in state in the Arizona State Capitol. There'll be a funeral service tomorrow. Former Senator Russ Feingold, my former boss, will be one of the pallbearers. I believe he's actually he will be there tomorrow. And then Joe Biden is, I think, given the main eulogy.
Right.
And then he will be transported to the Capitol in D.C., a separate event. This is just...
There's a nice photo of you, a younger photo of you.
From a few years back.
With the Senators Feingold and McCain.
Yeah.
The day that their landmark campaign finance reform passed.
Yes.
Did you post it?
I didn't post it.
Okay.
So, but I can.
Well, I mean, it's been so long. I'm afraid they might not recognize you.
Maybe not. But yeah, no, I did have the opportunity to meet Senator McCain during the time when that bill was passed. So the McCain-Feingold bill was obviously a big deal. Around it was 2001, I believe. So there was a couple weeks where it was the primary bill being debated on the Senate floor. So Russ and McCain and others were spending a lot of time down there, hashing out the differences and how trying to get enough co-sponsors and trying to get enough people to get it to pass. Mm-hmm. And they got some additional people on board when they made some compromises, and ultimately it made it through. Due to political pressure, George W. Bush signed it. Mm-hmm. Obviously, the Supreme Court undid some of it, and then we had the Citizens United decision. But it established, I think, and raised the profile of the issue, if nothing else.
Right, it sure did. And I mean, also every time you hear it, I'm Tammy Baldwin, I approve this message. That's a byproduct. There's a little bit of accountability, forced accountability there.
Yeah, I mean,
they used to be authorized and paid for, and they could say some weird committee or whatever.
People at least need to put their name on it now. I mean, that's an important thing.
A little bit. I mean, it's not really that.
It doesn't go as far as it needs to.
Not after Citizens United. Yeah. I mean, it's much like parts of Obamacare have been dismantled, partly due to court rulings, partly due to Trump. Yeah. So the National Labor Relations Act.
Yeah. So I mean, at the time, it passed after a lot of blood, sweat, and tears, and It made it through the Senate. George W. Bush signed it under political pressure because I don't think he, in his heart of hearts, believed in the bill necessarily. But I think he realized that if he were to veto it after it made it through the House and the Senate, it would be a political loser for him. He had bigger things on his mind, so he didn't consider it a priority in terms of like fighting it. So he signed it, and it went into law. So we had a celebration the night that it passed. Russ's staff, which I was a member of, and John McCain's staff, we all got together in a restaurant in D.C. And so, but yeah, I had the opportunity to meet Senator McCain, and he's very cordial, very nice guy. I mean, obviously somebody who has a level of respect, or had a level of respect for people from all points of view. And I mean, and the ultimate indicator of that is who's going to be speaking at his service this weekend.
Presidents Bush and Obama.
He specifically requested that George W. Bush and Barack Obama,
the two people who stood in his way to the White House.
Yeah, I mean, there are not.
If it weren't for either one,
he would be potentially president.
Both of them. You needed both of them to keep him out of the White House.
And I think there's a lesson there, but it's also obviously there's a unique bond that occurs when you're running against somebody for president. And then it is a lesson, though, in these that's trying
a level
times.
Of political civility that you don't see enough of right now. And what's funny is even when he was first running, and that was kind of his message then, was that there wasn't enough civility like that.
So he's using his funeral as one more lesson to teach the American people and people that are in leadership.
Especially
this is how you're supposed to operate.
Bush, it was about civility, and good on him.
Yeah, for sure.
I would argue, he maybe made his opponents better leaders.
I hope so.
And I'm not one to call George W. Bush a great leader, but obviously, in comparison to where we are today, I would take it quickly. I would gravitate toward that. I'd also point out that I probably voted for President Obama over McCain the year he won, and I'm still very proud of that. But I certainly feel that was an election, a rare election, where I really was voting for someone. It was like I didn't like obviously Palin on this ticket, but that aside, I mean, you probably had two fairly qualified candidates, but there was just at the time Obama was a better candidate for the time and for the country at that moment. And wound up being, in my opinion, a very good president. The only thing I would have against him is that at times he maybe lacked the killer instinct. Probably in some ways he might have bent over backwards for civility in ways that actually just weakened his hand.
Yeah, I mean, I think we could spend an entire podcast just talking about that, like what the approach was or should have been or should be. And he believed in that level of civility that McCain endorsed, and is even in his death continues to endorse in terms of how you treat the other side of the aisle and how you should engage others. And we can have very contentious debates and be very passionate, but at the end of the day, it shouldn't be personal on the level of you have like literal hate for the other side.
Yeah.
So
right.
And so we hopefully the hope is that that's not passe. Like hopefully we're living through a time right now where yes, things are very much.
I don't know if I have hatred for Donald Trump. I would say I don't, but I certainly have. I hate. Well, I feel like I hate some of the things he's done.
For sure.
Right. More than profound disagreements.
Yeah.
I guess with his leadership style, I find it unsavory
at the very least.
And quite clearly very harmful to a lot of families and potentially our environment and the rights of everyday Americans, as well as maybe even the future stability of others, the rights of people throughout the world. That said, who knows? Maybe 10 years from now, I'll think of something nice that I like
in hindsight. Yeah,
I mean, we did have that episode dedicated to. All right, enough. I should be back to civility. Speaking of civility, we've seen a little incivility in the Wisconsin governor's race of late.
Yeah.
Candidate Tony Evers, the superintendent of public instruction, who is the Democratic nominee, seems to be running a fairly able, if not inspiring yet campaign for governor, aided by his running mate Mandela Barnes, who I think is really pretty sharp. And if Evers isn't your ideal progressive, Barnes ought to be. And just the fact that you have somebody that close to, on the ticket like Barnes should be enough to allay anybody's concerns, whether you voted for McCabe or Mitchell or Vinehart or Keller Royce or whoever your Flynn. We did have this Foxconn plan, what have you.
We did have a poll that came out in the local newspaper.
Journal Sentinel. It put Evers ahead by 2.
By 2 points, and it was the sample size. It was even a respondents Republican Democrat, which was interesting.
Which seems actually a little low. I would argue that probably where it's low on one end, it's high on the other end. Whatever, it comes out in the middle. Which would be Charles Franklin's defense for what appeared to be some anomalies in the Marquette poll. The Marquette poll basically said the opposite of this. Which was, it was really close, but it was Walker by 2 among registered voters.
Right.
What's being more widely reported is the likely voters thing, because the tie makes a good headline.
Well, and as we get closer to the actual election, likely voter will be the more relevant poll.
Yeah, I don't think it is in August.
No.
I don't think you know who the
because there's still plenty of people that aren't paying that close attention.
And people sort themselves out. There's been some work with what we call the voter file. Which is the list of actual people who voted. And matching back. And the best research I've seen is that just between the presidential elections of 2012 and 2016 in Wisconsin, there was something like a 500,000 to 600,000 vote shift in who voted. In other words, over 600,000 people who did vote in 2012 did not vote in 2016. And about almost 500,000 of the 2016 voters had not voted in 2012. Now, a good amount of this discrepancy is simply aging in, and unfortunately, on the other end, aging out of the voting pool. But that only explains a little less than half of it. It still leaves several 100,000 people who were eligible and living in Wisconsin. Well, some of it might be that they moved, but no, I think it's still, at least, even when you factor movers in and out of state. Say somebody lived in Indiana in 2012, they moved to Wisconsin in 2016, or they lived in Wisconsin in 2012, they moved to California in 2016. That explains some of it, too. Between movers and then demographics by age, it explains maybe a little better than half of it. That still leaves about 200,000 new voters that could have voted in 2012 but didn't and voted in 2016. As well as nearly 300,000 voters who did vote in 2012 but chose not to cast a ballot in 2016.
Well, I mean, so
that's in Wisconsin. And that's all of these figures are larger than the margin of victory in 2016. Pretty close to actually the margin of victory for Obama in 2012, actually, even.
Well, and just to step back,
I'm getting into the weeds a little bit.
You are,
but that's
okay.
There's massive shifts. About 10% of the public that's eligible appears to be opting in or out of any given election.
We also need to just keep in mind, and we were talking to a mutual friend earlier tonight who's appears to be very cynical about this election, and
yes, he does.
So the other part of this is that the elections that Walker has been successful in have been Republican years. I mean, 2010 was an anti-Obama election. That's when Walker got elected to be Wisconsin governor. 2014 was an anti-Obama election. In terms of being
not as much, but yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
Right. It was 2 years after his reelect, and there was the backlash against that, and people coming out to vote for Congress,
and really a poor campaign on the part of Democrats, which I think carried over into 2016. My fear is that there may be some of that going on this year too.
I don't think to the same degree. I think there's people that are taking this election more seriously, and
I'm just telling you.
I mean, that's the optimist in me.
In 2016, everybody said that too.
Yeah, but I don't.
So we're taking this way more seriously than we took 2014.
2016 and 2018 have very different feelings. The stakes feel much different, and I don't think that's just my pulse. I think that based on talking to other people and based on the polling too.
Well, you're running directly against Donald Trump. We knew by now. We didn't know. We knew there was maybe something on with Russia. We certainly knew, if you were paying attention, that there would be, a huge right-wing swell on the courts if he wins.
Yep.
Which we're seeing right now. We knew, obviously, the Affordable Care Act would be at risk, which is surprisingly that they didn't get as far as they wanted on that. But that tax breaks to the rich, which actually I think we made them not as bad as we were afraid of them being, but they're still pretty bad. Big deficit spending while at the same time trying to kill government. Just the whole Ayn Rand kind
There's
of
a whole
ideal.
by
the anti-immigrant stuff for
by
sure.
The same token,
that's the biggest one that everybody knew that was coming if we voted for Trump, and they still didn't vote.
Yeah, but people sometimes things actually need to happen for them to wake up and be like, "Well, I didn't really think it was going to take place." I mean, I remember reading articles after the Brexit vote in Britain about people who voted for Brexit. They're like, "Well, I voted for it, but I didn't really think it was actually going to pass."
Yeah, but this isn't Brexit. Brexit's
but it's the same. It's
Brexit's a big
it's an apt analogy.
But we just elected one of the least likable people, public figures, who's been around for the better portion of my lifetime as a public figure.
Right.
It's a very almost all my lifetime as a very public figure. One of the least likable of them all. Mm-hmm. We elected him head of the free world.
But I think, you're talking about the types of issues that make people go out to the polls and vote. I mean, judges and that is at the top of the list. And look at what happened earlier this year with Rebecca Dallett winning the open Supreme Court justice seat on the Wisconsin Supreme Court. And it wasn't even close. And
that's
so
true,
if that's an indicator of voter motivation, I think Scott Walker has every reason to feel like he's in trouble.
That may be, but sound like our mutual friend here for a second. There are 550,000 people that voted for Dallett. That's a fraction of the people that voted for Clinton, and that wasn't even enough.
For sure.
It's about a third of the people who voted for Clinton.
Yeah, that's fair. Why aren't there more conservatives at the polls if this is an important issue to them?
I just don't, because maybe they think the president's solving the judge problem.
Yeah, but they know that the ultimate goal is to repeal Roe v. Wade, at which point abortion comes back to the states. So they should want
I think
conservative justices on the courts.
You're cutting a little too far down.
Maybe, but
I'm not even sure that's
I'm just
what
saying
every,
it wasn't.
every
I'm just saying that race wasn't close.
I'm not sure that's what every conservative. There's a lot of reasons people want a conservative judiciary.
Well,
that's one of them.
That's a big driver.
What if you don't like gays? What if you don't? What if you want more guns in the classroom?
Of course,
there's more school shootings or what have you.
Yep.
I shouldn't say more.
I'm just saying judges are at the top of the list for
sure, whatever. So. Right? Yeah, that's fine. But my point is, people on the left or anybody should have known this was coming. There could be a few things going on. One is there's the voter suppression through the photo ID. Now, that hasn't changed. In fact, this year what they've done is they've increased the number of people. They just spontaneously dropped from the voting rolls, including people who attempted to vote 2 Tuesdays ago and have been voting every year at their house. They've lived in their house for 20 years. Now, all of a sudden, they can't vote. Well, I mean, they can re-register, but imagine an election, like a general election, when there's lines out the door, how that will hold everything up.
Well, and I think
there's voter suppression going on. So
there is, and I think that's one of many issues I think that Tony Evers should harness. He should be behind 100%.
He should talk about it
because he should talk about automatic voter registration, which Oregon and other states are piloting. And it's
he ought to rail against voter suppression.
Well, that too,
because that's a big. People tend to vote more and be more motivated to vote when they see their vote being taken away.
Yeah,
and that's
and that may be a factor this year.
Well, that needs to be made clear. I didn't see that happen in the Clinton campaign, even though that was happening. Even though it was happening, I didn't see that message.
It was. I mean, there were. I think the provisional ballot number, I'm pretty sure, went up. And it may continue to go up.
Yeah. And then the other thing, too, is, you don't have a presidential year. I mean, we were at supposedly peak capacity. I know there was a big drop-off in turnout for Clinton over Obama. I'm just saying, Like, I'm being a little bit skeptical. Like, I mean, there's a good chance that the right.
Okay, a few weeks ago it was me. This week it's you. We'll trade off. We'll trade off roles in terms of being the skeptic and who's the optimist.
I think it's coming. The other thing is, I wonder if the Democrats tactically have the plan they need to get out the vote. And,
well, that's key.
I mean, I'm just basing this on what I've seen, even here in the primary.
Mm-hmm.
I've worked around some people that were knocking on every door in the inner city. Unfortunately, they didn't have the resources to do that many parts of the city. We call them wards. They usually call precincts in other cities.
Yeah.
They were able to do 17 out of 327 in the city. Where they did it, they had an increase in turnout of 45%. Everywhere else, the turnout increase was only 30%. This is based against the last primary for governor, and in 2014, which is actually more of a primary for attorney general. But whatever.
Right.
So the increase in other areas was like 30%. In these areas where they knocked on every door, it was 44%. That's a pretty significant shock.
Yes.
If that's a 14% increase. Or it came out to about it worked out to about 600 extra voters this produced. But the vast majority of the city, which is very democratic, is still going to targeted voters' doors, which makes no sense to me in a city with high residential turnover. They say, well, the national change of address follows people. Whatever. People in extreme poverty, it doesn't.
That's true.
And everybody
they tend to be more transient.
Right. Everybody I'm hearing from reports that it's about, maybe the lists are about 60% accurate in the city of Milwaukee. They're about 80 to 90% in the suburbs, but they're only about 60% accurate in the city. So you're missing a hell of a lot of potential voters.
Well, and that's why in terms of election reform, the other side could talk all they want about voter ID and voter fraud and all this nonsense. That's fine. Whatever. Let them have that. But the other side should have an answer to that, and it should be that, okay, we want to have legitimate elections too. We want to make sure that everything's on the up and up. Right. Nobody wants fraudulent elections. And we all should agree on that base principle. And what the solution is to that should be the debate. And so I'm saying that automatic voter registration, voting by mail, all these things that can be done today with total transparency. Well, we should be able to get behind that and make that at least as high profile an issue as Walker made voter ID.
Evers and Barnes ought to do that. However, I don't care how good our argument is, if our own tactics on our side reinforce the voter suppression, then what good is our best argument? If we're just going to the people that we think are reliable voters, where we need to increase, we're just going to talk to the same people that were already voting. How is that going to help us win? Yeah. You need a big turnout in Milwaukee, and you're just going back to the same old people.
Correct. Absolutely.
And my guess is that some of the people you're talking to aren't here anymore. For whatever reason. And meanwhile, there's new people that you could be talking to that won't be on your list.
People that recently moved to Milwaukee or whatever.
I mean, even the
or just came of age,
supposedly aggressive door knocking programs in the inner city. All of them are doing this targeted voter list, except for the one I am aware of. So I just think I think tactically, we may pay the price for bad tactics.
Well, let's hope not. I mean, I hope all these things are being taken into consideration.
I'm not sure they are. That's why I brought them up.
Okay.
That's why I brought it up. The more people talk about this, I think the better.
Well, it's something we should definitely keep an eye on, and I think we should continue to talk about
it. And I'm not trying to say, by the way, I'll just not to put too fine of a point on it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying we should go out to Waukesha or even West Dallas or even Wauwatosa or Whitefish Bay and knock on every door. It's probably not a good idea because you will be talking to a lot of Republicans and wasting your time and potentially turning out the other side's votes.
Yeah.
However, in the city of Milwaukee, except for maybe one or two aldermanic districts out of 15, you ought to be doing that. Yes, you ought to go to every door. I don't care if their chances of voting are 25%. If your conversation gets their chance to vote up by about 14 points more, that's thousands of votes when you go over the city. Enough probably that you can close the gap between Hillary and Trump.
Yeah.
So in a tight election, mark my words, if it's a tight election, if there's kind of average turnout in the city of Milwaukee, you're going to see Republicans win the tight elections. You're going to see Walker get reelected to a third term.
Well,
and if it's above average turnout, there's a pretty good chance to see Tony Evers be the next governor.
Let's hope so.
Yeah.
So, on that note, all our thoughts obviously go out to Senator McCain's family, and it's definitely a loss for the country. And what I would say is,
I've had the privilege to meet some of them.
I hope that the focus on his legacy this week hopefully injects something into our current politics that maybe starts to inoculate us against the poison that was put in a few years ago.
I hope so.
So
let's get some better tactics.
That too.
All right.
Forward, everybody.